video we're going to be talking about the WatchKit interface activity ring. So activity ring uses HealthKit in order to kind of keep track of certain things. So for example, you can set attributes for movement. So for example, how much energy you burned in a given day or time period, as well as exercise. So in terms of exercise time, and stand. So how many hours you've spent standing in a day. And we can basically create a new activity summary using HealthKit to keep track of these things, and we can allow the user to kind of set goals and keep track of goals. For example, it is possible to access the HealthKit based on the user's phone, for example, but at first we're just going to be creating our own HealthKit activity summary object, passing that into our activity ring, and it's going to be able to display kind of 3 different kinds of rings to show those 3 different properties I mentioned. So let's go ahead and let's bring in our activity ring here. So you can see I'm just on a blank interface with no objects on it. So let's go ahead and let's grab the activity ring object. Right, so as you can see here, it just tells us displays an activity ring. So I'm just going to grab it, drag it in, and it always only displays 3 rings basically. And there's not many attributes we can adjust in the attributes inspector. We can adjust the usual stuff: alpha channel, alignment, and size. And you know what, if you resize it, it does kind of adjust the rings dynamically as well. So you can have kind of smaller rings, you just need to resize it like so. Let's reset it back to what it was. I'm just going to fix the height, size to fit content. Okay, so there's not much we can do in terms of the attributes builder. That means we kind of need to set it up largely on the code side, so programmatically. So let's go ahead, let's jump into our assistant editor. Okay, and get rid of our attributes inspector. So in our assistant editor, we need to do a couple things. So because we're going to be using features of WatchKit, or not WatchKit, but we're going to be using features of HealthKit, which is not kind of bundled in along with our WatchKit app code here, right? So we're importing the WatchKit module. It did that for us, as well as Foundation, when we set up our project to use WatchKit. If we want to use HealthKit, we're going to have to import that. Because, you know what, let's take a look here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this activity ring an outlet. So control click. Bring it over. I'm going to call it my activity ring. Okay, so we have my activity ring, and we want to be able to basically pass it an activity summary object. So if I do a command click on this, we can see it has one method. This class has one method essentially. So all it can do really is set the activity summary, and it accepts an HK activity summary object. The only other thing we can say is animate it, yes or no. So true or false, it's a Boolean value. So if I try to pass it a HealthKit activity summary, it has to understand what HealthKit is. So what I mean by that is, let's do something like this. So let's say let an activity summary equal. And it looks something like this. So HK activity summary. But if I do this, it's not going to understand what an HK activity summary is. Right? So there it is. I don't know what that is. Unresolved identifier. Makes sense because we just need to say import HealthKit. So we can import the HealthKit module, and now it'll understand what HealthKit activity summary is. See, it went away. And now if I try to type it out, it will allow me to autocomplete because we did import that module. Right? So now we can see we have a couple options. HealthKit activity summary, summary type, summary query. We're going to go with this first one. Okay, so this is us basically instantiating a new HealthKit activity summary that we can then pass into my activity ring. Right? Recall that in the activity ring, that's exactly what it takes, right? An HK activity summary. So yes, you can query the HK activity from the user's phone, for example. That's quite a bit more complicated. So what we're going to do is we're just going to create our own version. Say we're making some kind of simple fitness tracking app. We can leverage the tools that Apple built into the WatchKit OS to make it easier for us, right? Just using the activity ring. It looks nice. It's a really nice feature that we can just kind of make use of. So let's go ahead and let's configure it to display something. So let's say I want to display something like how much energy has been burned versus what the user's goal in terms of burning energy is. And basically what happens is if you only set one of these properties, you know, every property set does have to have a goal as well as sort of an initial value or value you set. If you don't have a goal for it, it's not going to display anything. And you know, let's say we do set up something to display the active energy burned. If we don't set up the others, that's fine. They're just going to basically not fill out. So to show you what I mean by that, in my func awake, I'm going to basically configure my activity summary object. So it's going to look something like this. So activity summary dot, let's do this, Apple exercise time. Right, we can see that Apple has a couple built-in methods in HK quantity. And you know what, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to do active energy burn instead, just because I like to use this example more. So this one, as we can see, it's the amount of active energy that the user has burned during the specified day. So active energy burn, and you can see the one we're going to have to set after is the goal, but we'll set this one first. And what it takes is an HK quantity. Right, so as I autocomplete here, it fills out more of the descriptor. So HealthKit uses quantity objects to store numerical data, and it takes certain units. So let's just kind of autocomplete it out. And if we see here, it takes a unit, an HK unit, and also a double value to set that value at. Right, a double, it's basically numerical value. So the unit, it looks something like this. So HK, HealthKit unit, dot, and then what unit you want to use. So there's all kinds of units here. This one, since we're doing active energy burned, let's go with kilocalorie. Kilocalorie, calories, whatever you're more familiar with. There's quite a few different units available here. But we'll go with kilocalorie. Okay, so this is essentially what it's going to start at. So if it's tracking the user, for example, this is a good way to keep track of how much of it has been completed. So kilocalorie, what's a good value? Let's say, I don't know, 500. So this is going to be the initial position basically. And then how much is the goal? So the goal, if we make it out of, say, 750, well, 500 is most of the way there. So we should see a ring fill out to be about 3/4 of the way done, or 2/3. So if we say activity summary dot active energy burned goal equals HK quantity, and then we just basically make sure the units are matching. Unit HK unit dot kilocalorie, double value, let's say the goal is 750. Okay, so we set up that activity summary object. Now we need to pass that object to activity ring to use. So we can say my activity ring dot set activity summary, and it takes the activity summary that we created. Animate it, yeah, sure, why not? We'll animate it. Okay, let's launch that in the simulator. And we should see one of the rings being filled out most of the way. The other rings should not really be doing anything. Let's verify though. Let's launch it up and see what it does. Hey, there we go. So the ring's about 2/3. Right? This one is tracking our active energy burned. These ones we didn't configure, so they're just kind of sitting there, not doing anything. But that's the basics, really, of setting up one of these activity rings. So let's go ahead and let's set up our other rings as well, just for the practice of it. So basically, we're going to have a whole bunch of lines of code here setting up our various rings, or our two others that we haven't set up yet. So we set up our quote-unquote move, which was active energy burned. Let's set up exercise, perhaps. So activity summary dot, let's see, Apple exercise time. That's what I want. Exercise time equals HealthKit quantity. The unit here, let's put in HK unit minutes. Yeah, measuring time in minutes. Double value, how many minutes? Exercise time. Well, they say you should get usually 30 to 60 minutes per day. So let's say we've done 30. And our goal might be 60. So activity summary dot Apple exercise time goal equals HK quantity unit is HK unit dot minute. double value is 60. Okay, so that is our exercise time goal. Let's do final one for stand hours. So let's do activity summary dot Apple stand hours. I think it's called. Yep. Okay, Apple stand hours equals HK quantity unit HK unit dot let's see here, hour. Yeah, measuring time in hours. That's what we want. Double value. Let's say 1, and let's say this user has a goal of standing for at least 2 hours out of the work day. Apple stand hours goal HK quantity unit HK unit dot hour double value 2. Okay, and now we're just setting all these on our activity. Oops, let me fix that. In our activity summary, and we're passing the object already into activity ring, so nothing to change there. Let's see what these other rings look like. They should both be filled out halfway, right? So we will double check. As usual, we'll make sure we're doing a lot of testing along the way. And should load up in a second here. It should animate also. Uh-oh. What's this about? Right, it doesn't take HK unit hour. So let me get back to how it looked before here. Crashes is just part of the thing, right? So we can say HK unit dot count. Yeah, so count. Okay, so it kind of has hours built in already. So if we say count instead, this should accept it. Okay, it's kind of a cryptic error message, but I think we might have figured it out here. Let's test it out. And you know what? You always learn something from a crash. Okay, there we go. Yeah, so we just had to set it to count instead of .hours. Kind of counterintuitive, if you know what I mean. But here we go. So our outer ring is filled out. And then these two, you know, it's kind of hard to differentiate them. So maybe I'll switch one of these. Let's say the user met their goal here for exercise time. Okay, I'll relaunch that. It should be a bit easier to differentiate. But from here, you know, you could pass in variables here as well. So that gives us a hint as to the next direction we can take. If we have maybe a picker object or a slider or a button even to kind of reconfigure this, right? So you can see that this one is done, and it's kind of has nice emphasis there on the end. This one is halfway through. This final one, well, 2/3 of the way there. So pretty neat, right? So once you understand how to bring in the health kit module and how to kind of set these up, a lot of code really to set up a simple activity ring, but once you get down to it, it's not too complex. See the activity ring now. Let's figure out how we can kind of increment it. So let's say we had some kind of fitness app. The user can tap a button to signify that they've done, I don't know, 1 minute of exercise, for example. Just as a simple example at first. So, so our middle one here, the middle ring, is for Apple exercise time. We currently have it set to HK unit minute. So let's see. Let's put this started at 0. So we're going to start at 0. Then as the user taps the button, it's going to increment by 1 minute for every time the user taps. So what we can do here, first of all, let's declare a variable. So we'll say var minutes exercised, and we'll make sure to specify that it's type double. We'll start at 0, and then we'll just pass that in here for the initial value. So minute exercised. Okay, so now when we launch this in the simulator, you know, the middle ring, it should just be at 0 for total amount of time started. The goal, though, we still have it set to 60. So for now, we'll just leave that hard-coded in at 60. And then we're going to need to add in a button. Yeah, so there's our middle ring. It's not filled out at all. So let's go ahead and let's add a button in here using our objects library. So first I'm just going to make some room for it here in the watch face. I'm going to shrink my activity ring, bring over our button like so. Okay, great. So now we can make this button into an action. And what the action is going to do is going to basically increment this value, minute exercise, and then we'll also reset the activity ring. So bring this over here, my minute button. Okay, and the button can say, I'll just set it here, exercise for 1 minute. All right, cool. So, whoops, I made it an outlet instead of an action. So let me do that again. Okay, action, my exercise button. Okay, so we're going to be needing to reset the ring. So you know what, I'm going to move all of this stuff into a separate function. That way I can just call the function to reset the ring anytime I need to. So I'm going to do that right below here where we initialize it. So I'm going to call it func set ring. And I'm just going to grab this code and cut it. Cut, paste. Okay, neat. And now when we do func awake, we can just call this method. So set ring. Okay. So when we hit the exercise button, what are we going to do? Well, we're going to increment the minute exercise double. So we'll say minute exercised plus equals 1. So it's going to increment it by 1 every time we tap the button. And then we can just set the ring again. Okay, so this should work as intended. Let's try it out in our simulator. Okay, build succeeded. Wait for that to load up. There we go. Okay, let's exercise for 1 minute. Okay, let's keep going. It's pretty subtle because it's only incrementing by 1, but I'm just keeping on tapping here on my touchpad. And you see that it keeps going. And let's see what happens if we start to go too high. Okay, so it just kind of doubles around. That's kind of neat, actually. Great, so we have a simple function, and as you can imagine, you can do all sorts of things at this point. So, you know, whatever kind of function you can imagine, you can probably do with the activity ring if it involves kind of incrementing numbers or some kind of math, for example. So, you know, you can have the user submit, okay, how much energy do you want to burn? How much have you burned today? What about how much time have you stood up today, for example? So let's kind of play around with that some more as well here. So before that, though, I want to kind of break this big function into doing basically one discrete thing and doing it well. So that means instead of setting up our activity summary and then also setting the activity summary, you know, I'm going to move the activity summary where we're setting this up into basically a separate function or closure. So let's do that. I'll do it right below here. So we can say func set activity summary, okay, and it's going to return an HK, what is it here? Or no, it's going to be an activity summary, right? Yeah, so HK activity summary. HK activity summary. Okay, and then we can say let activity summary equal HK activity summary. And then I'm just going to grab this code, all of it basically, cut, paste it in here, and now we're setting it, and now we can return the activity summary. All right, and now, you know what, I don't think I need to declare it up here. And instead of just saying activity summary, we can just invoke this closure here, set activity summary. All right. So now we have this variable minute exercise that it's going to be referring to, and it's just going to kind of increment every time we call. So when we call set ring, Okay, when we call set ring, it's going to invoke my activity ring. Set activity summary, it's going to invoke this closure set activity summary. And this is where we will actually set the activity summary. Okay, so it might seem more complex, but in my view, it's always good to kind of separate each function or method you have into doing a very specific thing. Right here, it's in the name. So we're setting the activity summary here, and we just invoke that from set ring. So let's test it just to make sure it's still working. And now we have kind of more modular code, I guess. So if we need to kind of update a variable, it's just kind of more clear in our intentions what our code is doing. Okay, so tap here. Great. So it's still working, and that is awesome. Well, it's great to be able to set the increment going up by 1 for every button we press. It's not exactly practical. So if we want something a bit more practical, we probably want to use something like a picker object, which allows the user to kind of use the picker to set maybe the goal and also the amount of time exercised, for example. And since it is watchOS, we can't really have the user input text. It's not an option. So really the picker is probably the next best option. So let's refactor this a little bit here. I'm going to get rid of my button. So I'm going to get rid of the function here where I set up the minutes to exercise. So for that to increment, I'm going to get rid of the button here as well. And I'm going to bring in basically two picker objects. I'm going to shrink this a little bit. And I'm going to put them in a group so that they can sit next to each other on the page. Right, so we have a group here. And let me make this a bit bigger. And in the group, I'm going to put two picker objects. So picker, put it right there. Let's shrink this one. Okay, we'll just adjust the size here, I guess. So width, we will just do fixed. We'll do 50. Okay, so that's one picker. Let's fix the height as well. Actually, no, the height's fine. We'll bring in another picker next to it. This one will make the same width, fixed, 50. Okay, so now they're sitting right next to each other. We could probably expand it out a little bit more, actually. So let's make this one wider, and this one as well. Make them both 60, perhaps. Okay, so the styling is not super important at this point, so I'm not going to worry about style. I do want to have the caption, though. Let's see here. Focus style, yeah, outline with caption. Okay, so we have a couple simple picker objects here. We need to just configure them. So let's do that. So I'm going to basically use a closure to configure both of these. And let's say we want to give the user the option to select from, let's say, 1 to 60 minutes for exercise. So var exercise time, range perhaps. And we'll just say 1 ... 60. Okay, so these are going to be the options available in our picker. This can be a constant, actually. So we'll say let. Okay, and then when we're configuring our picker objects, we can do that when we call func awake. So let's bring in both of these as outlets. My goal picker, for example, and this one will be my actual, or no, we'll say my exercise picker. Okay, and I'm just going to group these together so it's easier to see. All right, so let's configure these. We can basically do something like this. So let exercise time equals, and we'll kind of we'll use a closure to map over this range, basically this exercise time range. So if we say, actually, yeah, we want to return it as a WK picker item, an array of WK picker items. Okay, and now we can say exercise time range, right? It's countable close range. So we can say map And we're going to just basically do something like this. So let picker entry equal WK picker item, right? And now because it's a WK picker item, we can actually just set all the values we need. So caption, this is what's going to appear kind of above when we're selecting it. So what this takes is a string. So we can say goal, and we'll convert each number into a string. So for example, the first one is going to be goal 1 minute, for example. So to convert something into a string, go like this, and we'll use kind of this special placeholder value, 1 minute. Okay, so that's the caption. Not sure if we'll have enough space to see that, but that's okay for now. And then we can set the actual content of the picker. So picker entry dot, let's see here, that title is the text to display for the item, equal, and yeah, we'll convert this into a string, and we'll just take whatever value we're at the time, as we're kind of mapping over it. And then we can just return picker entry. Now when we set up, we can set up both of our, actually we can get rid of goal here. No, let's leave goal. We can set up each of these to kind of display what we just configured in our closure. So if I say my goal picker dot set items, you can see it takes an array of WK picker items, which is what we set up in our closure here. So we can say exercise time. Okay, so that's going to configure this first one, right? I believe that's the first one. Yeah, my goal picker is the first one. My exercise picker, we can do that as well. So my exercise picker dot set items exercise time. So they're both going to say goal. So maybe I will get rid of goal here. And we'll add an S here. And let's just see if we configured this correctly just before we move on to the next step, just to make sure that there's kind of no errors happening here. And the idea is I want to see the numbers 1 to 60 in our picker that the user can then select. So we'll wait for our simulator to load up, and I think this should be functioning as intended. Okay, so here's one of our pickers, and as you can see, I'm basically using my scroll wheel, but you could use the digital crown for this on the actual watch. Right, versus if you select this picker over here, oh, I guess we didn't select it to have a caption. So let's fix that. Yeah, so focus style, there we go, outline with caption. Okay, so they both contain the same things. We can just assign different functions to each of them though. So one function will set the goal and one will set the actual in terms of exercise time. And this is kind of how you can use this to your advantage, right? So now it's 1 minute, 2 minutes, for example, and then down here over the same thing. So the one on the left, we can maybe add a label to it above or below or something like that. But it's clear to the user in this case because we have the caption showing what they're selecting. It's clear that it's minutes, and it's clear that you can kind of select all the way to 60. And then if you wanted more, of course, you would just put a number higher than 60. So let's configure different functions for each of these so that it kind of sets the activity ring using that. So let's set up some variables here. So we already have minute exercised. Let's also add var exercise time goal, and this will be a double. And this we will also default maybe to 0. Okay, so we have exercise time goal. Let's also set that up when we're setting up our activity summary. So we currently have a variable here for exercise time. Let's put time goal. We can say exercise time goal. There we go. Okay, so this will initialize to 0 until the user starts playing with the picker items. All right, so I'm going to add each of these as a separate function, basically, or separate action. So this one will be an action. Goal picker was set, for example, you can see it tells us whatever value it lands on. So, for example, if we wanted to see what the value is, we can just kind of print it out, value, like this. Let me just do a sanity check, because I think it shows the index, but I want it to be sure here before I do anything else. So we'll let this load up, and then we'll check the console. So it should load up shortly here. Okay, let's check this out in the console. So as I scroll through, okay, so I'm on 3. Next I'm on, go on, 5. Okay, yeah, so it is the index, so we're going to want to increase it by 1, for example. So what I mean by that is if we want the actual minute to match what was selected in the picker, we can just do a simple addition. So let goal equals, convert it into a double because it's going to default to an integer, and we can say value plus 1, and this will give us the actual number we want because it is zero-based indexed, so we have to increase it by 1 if we want it to match the actual number. So double plus 1, and then we can say, let's see, what is it called? Exercise time goal. Exercise time goal equals goal. Right? And then we can say set ring. All right, so this is us setting up the goal. Let's set up the actual here, and it's essentially the same method. So actual picker was set. That's not a good name. So we'll say exercise was picked. Exercise time, maybe, was picked. It's hard to come up with names sometimes. Oops, that's an outlet. That's not what I want. I want an action. Okay, action. Exercise time was set. Okay, and this has the same values, so we can say again, let goal equals double value plus 1. Actually, it's not goal. Let's be more descriptive. Let exercised time. And then we can say, what's the variable again? What is it here? Exercise, minute exercised. Minute exercised equals exercised time. And we set the ring again. All right, so let's try it out. Let's see if it's working. We'll keep an eye on our time ring. And obviously we're just setting the exercise time. You can do this for the other rings as well. It would be the exact same methodology. Okay, there we go. So it's currently set to 0, 0. Let's set a goal. So we'll increase that. And if we say, okay, I've exercised for 5 minutes of my goal, great. So it's working exactly as intended. Let's set a higher goal. We can see it kind of responds because it's calling set ring every time we change something here. So it does respond accordingly. So if our goal is 50 minutes, then we slowly start to go through it. And eventually we reach 60 and it completes. Or 50, not 50 or 49, for example. So 49, we're almost there. 50, we're there. And it's a pretty neat way of showing that. If you didn't want it to animate, obviously you would just say animate false when we set up the set ring function, which is here animated true. You just put false instead. But if you wanted to put other pickers, for example, or even maybe a slider of some sort, or whatever you need, whatever kind of function you can imagine, you can probably call it on the activity ring. It's not too complex once you just kind of need to increment variables, for example.